Welcome, everyone. Let's give everybody a minute to come in. You know, it's like pulling back the curtains, guys. I mean, we've never told them this before, but we usually have about 20 minutes to prepare before everybody joins us.
What do you mean?
What do we just have, about 20 seconds?
What do you mean 20 minutes? We usually prep for weeks, months in advance.
Yeah, you know, and here we are again. I decorated my home just like a hotel room. So just to feel comfortable. Joe, you know about that, right?
Absolutely.
All right.
Just do the public service announcement is as you're coming in, and if you are going to type in the chat box, the default only defaults to showing only the panelists and hosts, but change it so it goes to everyone because we want to hear from everyone's wisdom. So if you are going to type something, we want everyone to be able to see it. And as you're doing that, maybe you just say what the temperature is where you are, just so we know it's working.
Yeah, in real temperature though, that's Fahrenheit.
That's Celsius.
For all you Canadians.
Not only Canadians, I just like to point out that the US is the only country in the world that still uses imperial. 90 degrees Celsius, that's freaking hot. Water boils.
You're right. All right, why don't we get started? Sunjay, why don't you tell everybody where you are, who you are, what you are.
So first of all, welcome to Every Other Wednesdays. What we do is we get together every other Wednesdays and we talk about culture issues within organizations. My name is Sunjay. I am based just outside of Toronto, and I'm known by a brand called the 10-80-10 principle, which helps organizations and individuals focus on their strengths.
Welcome. And I'm Jeff Tobe. Coloring outside the lines is my life. I work with organizations to take them on a customer experience journey. By the way, you may notice that we are two cohorts short. There must be a joke there somewhere. I don't know what it is, but obviously Richard Haddon and Michael Kerr are actually working today, so lucky them. And so you're stuck with Sunjay and me, but the best news is we've got an amazing guest today and a guest host, and I'm very excited to have Joe Mull join us. Just a little bit about Joe that I know. I know he writes about commitment in the workplace. He's the former head of learning and development for one of the largest physician groups in the U.S. He is CEO of Joe Mull and Associates, and he's on a mission, right, Joe? You're on a mission to fill workplaces with better bosses. He's the author of 2 books, Cure for the Common Leader and No More Team Drama. And he's host of an amazing podcast that I encourage you all to sign up and register for. It's called Boss Better Now. By the way, I do know Joe personally as well. So Joe, be prepared for this. But one thing I know about you is that you know every word to the musical Hamilton. Right?
That's true. That's true.
So we would like to hear a little bit about you. We'd like to hear a little refrain from "You'll Be Back," my favorite song.
In fact, Joe, I don't know, not to put you on the spot, but every question that we will be asking, you actually have to answer in song.
Well, I'm really glad to be in the room where it happens. Let's start there. This is apparently the Zoom room where it happens. And even though you're 2 hosts down, they'll be back. And that's the quickest, fastest reference I can give you out of my Hamel brain.
What about us giving you your shot?
Yes, I'm not going to throw away that shot, Jeff.
Okay.
I am, and I'm satisfied. I'm really satisfied that I'm not going to throw it away.
I love it. And one other thing I want to mention about Joe that most people don't know is that he recently appeared on Good Morning America after losing 46 pounds during COVID quarantine. So Joe,
true story.
The question we all want to know is, have you kept it off?
I have, yeah, for the most part. Right now, I had a goal weight that I wanted to get under, and I hit that in June of 2020. And so now it's August 11th, 2021. I am 2 pounds higher than I was on that goal weight date. Had a big lunch, so we're going to call it that reason why.
Okay.
But yes. So going strong. Thank you for that, my friend.
As your friend, I'm so embarrassed for you that you're 2 pounds over. You know, I'm so sorry. But look, Carol said in the chat box that she was supposed to see Hamilton June 2020, and now it's scheduled for December 2021. And Carol, I'm going to assume that you are in Canada, and if so, then you shouldn't plan on December 2021 either. I don't think so. Things are not.
Oh, she's in LA.
Oh, LA. Yeah. I'm sorry, Carol. Okay. Well,
so
good.
there you go. Yeah, I mean, this is fantastic. We're happy to have you here. And again, I think I said this into one of the email threads. Very appreciative of you willing to do this, even though you actually know Jeff personally. So thank you for that.
So Joe, let's jump right into this before Sunjay gets another word in. So, my question to you to start with, we're all about culture. So I guess my first question for you is, why do good bosses matter now more than ever when it comes to culture?
Well, there's so much social science research that tells us that if we want to create the conditions at work for people to thrive, that a person's direct supervisor is the single most influential factor. And we've just been through a year and a half where it's gotten harder and harder to thrive, where people are perhaps enduring more stress, have had to adapt more than ever before. And the success or failure of people to do that is certainly tied to the quality and kind of support they get from their leader, from their direct supervisor. So, we always say commitment comes from better bosses, and it's probably never been more true than it is right now.
So along that, as I understand it, you're a guy that likes to use a lot of four-letter words. Specifically boss being one of them. So as I understand it, that you are prescribed to the philosophy that boss, like WORK, work, is a four-letter word. To talk to us a bit about that.
Yeah, I don't get hung up on these debates that we tend to have on LinkedIn about the right word to talk about leadership. And, and everybody here knows you can get on the internet, on social media, on LinkedIn any day. And I see dozens of posts about these sort of semantic arguments about, well, leader's a better word than manager and manager's a better word than supervisor. I don't think the word boss is a bad word because it's the word people use. If I walk into any business in America and there's somebody working at the front desk or at the counter and I say, hey, can you point me towards your boss? They're going to turn and point to someone, and they're not going to be offended by that word. They know what I'm asking. If your neighbor gets a new job and you invite him or her over to catch up over a socially distanced glass of wine, and you start talking about his or her new job, there's probably going to come a point where you say, so what do you think of your new boss? And there's a pretty good chance your neighbor is not going to go, ooh, listen, we don't like to use that word. We refer to my chief motivation officer. So I think that we spend a lot of time and energy on these debates that are a waste of time. Instead of debating whether or not the word boss is bad, let's translate that energy into learning what it means to not be a bad boss.
Excellent. So what are the core skills that a boss has to develop to be effective, would you say?
Oh man, how much time do you have today?
I know.
See, that's the
time, so
that's the thing, right? I've seen.
Talk slow.
And Joe, we like to talk too, so.
Well, and so why don't we sort of throw that question around to everybody then? Because I think that one of the things that I get frustrated about from a learning and development perspective and from a thought leadership perspective are folks who say leadership comes down to this single factor, or, get good at this one thing and you'll be a champion leader. And it's not, it's complicated. I tend to believe that leadership starts with self-awareness, understanding my strengths, my weaknesses, my style, what I'm good at. Maybe I can get an inkling of what I don't know. Where do I need to flex my style to be successful? Leadership also involves some knowledge acquisition. People need to know how to create conditions that motivate people from a psychological perspective. They need to understand what the mission and the vision and the strategy of an organization is. They need to know the politics and the personalities of people involved. There are certainly skills inherent in being a good boss. Everything from learning how to run a meeting to how to mediate conflict to how to spot talent and align it to the work that people are doing. And then relationship building goes on that list too. How do I concern myself not just with the quality of my relationship with the people that work for me, but how do I influence the quality of the relationship between people who work together? Because I think that's a part of a leader's job as well. What do you guys think? Where does it start for each of you?
First of all, let me just say to everybody watching, please, in the chat box, put an adjective that you think is a core skill that leaders have to develop to be effective, as we're talking as well. Well, you know where I'm going, Joe. I mean, I think that you have to have some sense of creativity. I think that a leader with the ability to look at things from a different perspective, to be able to be agile, which is the word of the day, to be able to sort of turn on a dime. To me, that's incredibly important. Sunjay, what do you think?
I would say it comes down to recognizing the values of the individual. And I think so too often when especially if we have a position of authority or leadership by designation, not necessarily earned, but by that you are the boss, we feel the need to have our ways set. And there's an expectation that because you work for me, you have to change who you are to do what I say. And instead of leadership being more vulnerable, going, all right, here's my thought. I'm not necessarily set in my ways. I'm open to understanding what's important to you. And then the most important piece I think is having a snapshot of what the people are. My mind went here, and I apologize in advance, but there's an episode of Family Guy and in which Peter ends up creating a new society. And then they find a Twinkie factory, whatever. And so they're picking occupations and they're just randomly drawing occupations out of a hat. And so this one guy goes, well, I was a doctor in the previous city. And he goes, no, you're now the garbage collector, go. Right. And so too often we do that. We don't recognize people's strengths. So maybe, for example, there's someone in the organization who is a very social party planner and not empowering them to run the winter Christmas party. Sorry, I can't say Christmas. It's probably politically incorrect. The winter party or the summer shindig or whatever. So I think that the most powerful, effective leaders are the ones that kind of go, I know this about that person. They're social, they're not. We'll give them the social task, we'll give them the not social task, or they're good with numbers or they're bad with numbers or whatever it is. So I think that's one of the most important dynamics.
Yeah. Before we go on, I'm going to put a hold for 1 second. Sunjay, can you make your community announcement again? There's a lot of people just sending their answers.
Absolutely. Community announcement that says this: when you enter into this Zoom chat, by default, when you send a message, it only goes to the panelists, which means only Jeff and Joe and I will see it. And so what we would love is for your wisdom to be shared with everyone. So if there's a little drop-down menu where it says currently it says hosts and panels, or it defaults to that. If you drop down and click it so it says everyone, then everyone can share in your brilliance.
Sorry, Joe, I interrupted your thoughts.
It's okay. I don't know if this is the case for everyone else, but I am not able to select everyone from the chat. Okay. So I'm not sure if that's enabled. So we might be in a situation where they have to enter their answers and we will have to share them with everyone.
No, your reputation preceded you, so we made it that way. So you couldn't.
Oh, okay. So it's off limits for me. Got it. That's fair.
But we've got a lot of great words over here. I mean, approachable, trustworthy. Frederick always has a great perspective, and I just want to read. He said he thinks that boss is positional and linear. Leaders are more vertical. They focus on relationships and strategy. How would you answer that?
Well, if you have a boss who doesn't do those things, they're a bad boss. And so I think the label is less important than the exact function that he just described. Whether you call yourself a boss or a manager or a supervisor or a leader, I'm of the mind that your number one job at work is to keep people safe. And right underneath that is to figure out what people need to be at their best. That's the job. I come into the workplace and I figure out what do these people need to be at their best every day. And I'm going to fight like crazy to give that to them. One of the ways you do that is just what Sunjay said, is about aligning talent to people's role, figuring out how to spot that talent, how to notice it, how to name it, how to engage people in dialogue around it, and then how to position them to target that talent to the work that they're doing so that we can unleash their creativity and unleash all of the psychological gifts that we get when people are lighting up inside because they get to do work that aligns with who they are and what they bring to the table.
Yeah. And Sunjay, Stephen Rayfield's with us, our former co-host, and he said delegation is the word that he thought of when it comes to leadership. Are you going to monitor this, Sunjay? We didn't decide this before.
No, it's all free for all today. So Brenda's saying recognizing strength is important, but equally as important is recognizing people may want to have opportunities outside their comfort zone as well. Mm-hmm. And I wholeheartedly agree with that, Brenda. But I think that sometimes people confuse with, when you look at a comfort zone, there's 3 circles. There's comfort zone, there's panic zone, but in between there is growth zone. And sometimes people don't appreciate that the middle one, there is a growth zone. So you think that if it's not comfort zone, I'm freaking out and I can't do it. But that's where, the best opportunities for individuals or organizations as a whole comes from, is putting people in that growth zone. So thank you for that. Inspiration, empowering them. So I'm going to go back to an earlier comment that you made, Joe, and that is, you're saying that the function of the boss, leader, supervisor, manager, et cetera, is to keep them safe and to help them get their best. So that'd be my question to you is, how does a boss, leader, we need a word that sums all that up. We'll call it the big cheese. How do we get the big cheese to engage employees and create an environment or a culture that people are inspired and they don't have to go to work, but they actually get to go to work?
I think if we want leaders to adopt that mindset and then take on responsibility for doing that, they need ongoing coaching, mentoring, training, and support. We know that we are relying on underdeveloped leaders across every industry in the world. People are selected. This is not news to anybody participating today, but people are selected for leadership roles because of their technical knowledge or their years of experience, their aptitude around certain processes or procedures. And then they get into those roles, and the challenges they face every day aren't just technical or experiential, they are people related. And so, too often we see one of three things happening. We see a leader who says, oh my goodness, there's a whole other set of challenges that I have to take on in this role. So I need to learn and grow. And they seek out that type of development. In other cases, they wash out. They say, hey, this people management stuff and leading teams and doing, just like you said, Sunjay, figuring out how to create those conditions for people to thrive. I don't like that kind of work. I don't want to do it. So I'm out of here. And that's usually a good thing when people come to that realization and they say, this isn't the right role for me. The biggest problem are the people in the middle. The people who get stuck in that kind of management mindset where my job is to keep the trains running on time, and they focus on all of the tactical and technical aspects of their work. And so I'm doing the reports and I'm building the schedules and I'm going to the meetings, but I'm not necessarily carving out time for the development of myself and then the development of the people in my charge. And so I think that in the organizations where people do thrive, where they do have the highest levels of engagement, we see a commitment across the board to providing leaders with that kind of ongoing learning, coaching, development, and support so that they learn what the benefits are to approaching their work as a leader with that mindset, because their whole life and job gets easier when they decide that I'm going to put people at the center of everything I do, and I'm going to develop the kinds of relationships and interactions with them that drive them to be their best. It's not just about the tactical and technical aspects of the work.
Though, I think you missed one boss there, and if I can interrupt, and I think that, having just worked with a government agency, where I'm going with this, there are bosses who absolutely should not be bosses, but they got there because, they've been there a long time. They didn't have the skills, although we can teach them the skills, and they're not going anywhere either. It's not like they're going to leave. So I think there's that third boss. And then you talk to them about personal development or professional development, and they just aren't interested. They're just not motivated to do that because they have the position and they know they're not going to lose it. And I don't even know if there's a comment here, Joe. I'm just really, I guess I'm venting from a recent training that I did with leaders in an agency where they were kind of just sitting there with their arms crossed. And it's like, yeah, teach me something, right? Go ahead.
I don't want to be fixed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I know we have quite a few government agencies represented with our regular viewers too.
So I kind of to piggyback on that. I mean, that's the core fundamental of what I do is I use the language 10-80-10, but basically they're your top 10 bosses, the ones that want to be there, that are thriving, that are excited, that want to make a difference. There's the bottom 10, the ones that shouldn't be there, that suck the life out of the individuals, the employees, and each other. And then there's a big chunk in the middle. And you're saying that, they are the biggest potential, but they're also the biggest threat. And the question is, who do they end up following? Because if they end up following the bottom 10, then you have a toxic environment. And if they end up following the top 10, then you have a dynamic place. And so anyway, I'm going to jump to the chat.
Wait, can I just say that was a masterful job of getting in the 10-80-10 principle.
Didn't you like that? Well,
that's what he's known for.
To Joe's point, it's this ongoing training piece of stuff. And this is why you should be hiring Jeff and Joe and myself. How's that? Is that a little more subtle?
I like that.
I want to jump on Carol's comment here. It says, do you find that most people who take that kind of training actually put it to use, or do they default back to what they're familiar with? And again, if you hire really, really good trainers, totally different. But yeah, what are your comments on that? What's your feedback to that?
Do I find that most people who take that kind of training actually put it to use, or do they default back to what they're familiar with? That depends on a couple of factors. The first is what's in it for them. Do they see a benefit to showing up in a different way? And if in the training we have been able to get some buy-in and help people understand what we gain when we show up in such a way that people are emotionally and psychologically committed, if they know that there's a payoff to it, they're going to be more willing to put in the effort. But it also depends on the, wait for it, that's a Hamilton reference. It also depends on culture. See what I did there? My favorite definition of the word culture is that culture is the way we do things around here. And so if the way we do things around here in a company is that there is an expectation across the organization that this is how leaders show up, and that this is how leaders are expected to lead other people, then yeah, it's much more likely those folks are going to happen. I get asked a lot when I go and do frontline and mid-level leadership training, whether senior leadership need to attend, which is always an interesting framing. And the conversation that I have with them is, if you want me to introduce a whole model for how people are going to show up and give them an entire vocabulary to use to be better at leadership, and nobody above the mid-level manager level is going to know what those things are, you're destined to fail. And so that's where the culture conversation comes in. What is the overarching commitment by the organization to drive that kind of mindset and then training for leaders to show up in that way?
So Carol's follow-up question is, I think what I'm really asking is, can most people change? And I have to jump in because, again, it's where my mind went. It reminds me of the old bad joke. How many psychiatrists does it take to change a light bulb? Only one, but the light bulb has to want to change, right? So can people change? Absolutely they can, if they want to. But if they were, like Jeff was pointing out, they're crossing their arms going, I don't want to be fixed. No, they're not going to change. But if you have an open mind and you're willing to do something, then yeah, absolutely people can change.
So in a previous life, I was the director of health education and promotion for a rather large university. So I have that sort of health education background in a previous life. And what we know is that change only occurs when the pain of staying the same finally outweighs the pain of the change. But underneath that, what we also know is that there are a couple of beliefs that people need to hold simultaneously in order to change. First, they need to believe that there's a consequence to not changing. They need to believe there's a benefit to making the change. And they need to believe that they are capable of the change. They refer to this in the literature as self-efficacy. I believe that I can do this. And so when we do our leadership development work, and we have a year-round subscription program called our Boss Better Leadership Academy, what we focus on are the bite-size learning and the bite-size actions that people can take every day that actually adopt this kind of leadership mindset. So yes, people can change, but only if those three things, those three beliefs are held simultaneously. If you want to drive people toward change, we have to work on shining a light on each of those three things: consequences, benefits, and capabilities.
I love it. I'm going to go to what Stephen Rayfield asked. Before I do, I want to just tell Brenda, who said she brought Sunjay to Edmonton twice. It's when you bring the bottom of the barrel, everything else, I'm telling you, Brenda, you got to bring somebody else just to have a benchmark, but he's a great benchmark. But Stephen asked, now that people may not return to the office, what does a boss have to learn to do better for those people? Joe, you there?
Okay, you want me to go again? You want to start with me?
No, you.
Okay.
Actually, hold on a second. Wait, before you do, Lisa asked you to say, what are the three things again that you need?
And I just typed them in the chat. That's why I didn't catch the end of the question. I was typing them in the chat.
Thank you. How come it went to everyone? So I guess
I now have the power. I don't know if the universe granted me.
You whined and complained enough that it worked.
That's right.
I'll take it.
All right, let me go back. So I'm going to answer this first. And the question was, now that people may not return to the office, which that's the case, it may never happen for some people. What does a boss have to learn to do better for those people? And the word that comes to mind is engagement. Richard isn't here, but I really believe that the best bosses, the best supervisors, managers, leaders are those who are going to be able to engage their people remotely, virtually. And it doesn't mean on a Zoom call. Yes, that's part of it. But I think it's about keeping them engaged throughout the day and what they're doing, making sure they're doing their jobs, but that little extra as well. What do you guys say?
I'm going to give you 4.
Okay.
I think it's flexibility, communication, trust, and connection. And so let me hit each of those very quickly. First and foremost, the entire ways in which people are working are different than they ever have been before. They have rapidly changed, and leaders who are able to be flexible and accommodating in terms of where, when, and how people work are going to reap the benefits of engagement, of that emotional and psychological commitment, if they're able to show up in that way. So being flexible, being adaptable in terms of how, when, where people work. I think that's on the list. Absolutely. Second thing is communication. We know that employee engagement in the US actually went up when the pandemic started. And that sounds absurd that our emotional and psychological commitment at work would increase during one of the most disruptive, stressful times in our adult professional lives. But it happened, and one of the reasons is because leaders everywhere were over communicating with their direct reports, and we had to in order to get through sometimes just hours. And so over communicating, constantly sharing information, making sure people are in the know and in the loop, that goes on the list for me. Number 3 is about trust. In an environment now where more people are working remote, where we are less able to look over people's shoulders or have lengthier conversations and one-on-one meetings in the hallways in the workplace, it's incumbent upon leaders to learn how to build trust and grant trust, and to be able to say to people, listen, how you get to your work product or your final result may be different than the way that I do it, but let's come to an agreement on what the ends are, and I'll leave it to you to determine the means. That's part of the flexibility that I think is going to lead to a lot of success for leaders who are able to possess it. And so being able to trust folks who are in remote environments, who are working in different types of circumstances and schedules, that's the third thing on the list. Finally, connection. Just because people maybe aren't in the office as much anymore, or we're splitting teams into hybrid models, people still need to feel a sense of belonging and connection to the people that they work with. And so leaders who get creative on how to help people come together, find things in common, access each other's humanity are going to go a long way to creating an environment where people will be successful.
So I'll just kind of chime in here. And if I recall, you said flexibility, communication, trust, and connection.
You got it.
I agree 100%. You know, what he said, ditto. But here's what I don't think it changes. It doesn't matter if you're remote or not. Like, you still need those four principles. An effective leader.
We've needed them for 20 years. Yep.
We've needed them for 2,000 years. Yep. It doesn't mean we've always done it, but right. What changes is the medium in which we do it. Now, how you trust your people, it's go work from home. I trust you. You're going to get your stuff done. Before, it used to be go work in your cubicle. I trust you're going to get things out done. Or communication. Before, it used to be we're going to go sit down and have a coffee at 10 a.m. And now we're going to have a Zoom call at 11:30. So the same core principles are there. Nothing has changed other than how we manifest them and actually how we physically act them out. So yeah, I 100% agree that those are the beans.
And isn't it remarkable how much those things are not happening in a variety of places? I mean, every week I'm seeing articles all over the place about organizations' desire to try and track, control, monitor people's work away from home. And the ways and the methodologies and the systems that they're putting in place to do that are antithetical to what we just talked about. And it erodes trust, and it robs people of the sense that I'm being monitored 24/7 or whenever I'm doing my work in an effort to keep tabs on me or to make remote work, when the truth is we know remote works more effectively when you grant people that trust and you give them the space that they need to do their work in the ways that makes the most sense for them.
Yeah. I hate to use my least favorite word during the last 16 months, and that's pivot, but I want to pivot for a second. I know that from past discussions on this show that there are some of our regular attendees who, I'm trying to think how to say this tactfully, so who work in what can be called only a toxic environment. And I know it's because of their bosses. So I'm curious, Joe, and this one is for you specifically because we've tried to answer this. Mm-hmm. Is there a way that they love their job, they like where they work, it's just that boss. Is there a way to approach a boss that is tactful, is effective, and obviously won't get them fired. So I'm
Tranquilizers.
perspective, how you feel about that.
And what did you say, Sunjay?
Tranquilizers.
Yeah.
Then they
So-
have to listen. So.
Yes. How do I navigate a toxic boss, and is there a path to improving that?
I wish I had said that.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I have learned at the feet of a lot of other really smart people. So what I'm about to say to you is not an original like Joe Mull idea. I'm parroting something that I learned from actually a friend of ours, Jeff, Bonnie Artman Fox, who you should absolutely have on your show at some point, because she talks a lot about how our experiences in our youth and in our marriages influence how we show up in the workplace. She's a really smart lady around conflict and whatnot. And the first thing that she will tell you about working for toxic or abrasive bosses is that it is not an employee's job to fix the toxic boss. And so I think there are a lot of folks out there who spend a lot of time trying to figure out, how can I improve how this person shows up? And it's not going to happen. And we have to kind of let go. We be like Elsa, let it go. I'm going to drop Disney music references here too.
Sing it. Sing it.
Let it go. Let it go. Don't hold on to that crap anymore. We can't fix toxic bosses. We have to learn how to work around them, or we have to decide that we are worthy of more and move on to an environment that fully rewards the talent and the effort that we bring to our work. I know there's a lot of privilege in that statement. I am not saying that everybody is in a position where they can do that. If I have a toxic boss, yes, one potential path is a dialogue where we say, there are a couple of things that I feel like if I could get them with a greater frequency would allow me to perform at an even higher level. And if we can frame it in such a way where then they get something that's important to them, we might be able to have a conversation about what's missing or what I need or what I'm going to ask them to change. I always talk about needing to create line of sight between the new behavior that you want as the employee and something that's really important to that toxic boss. So I do a lot of work in healthcare. So I have this conversation a lot about difficult physicians. I work with a lot of practice administrators who maybe have to navigate the stronger abrasive personality of some doctors. Most doctors are amazing. Not painting with a broad brush, but just in terms of the circumstances and the conversations I've had. And what we will do together is brainstorm what is most important to that physician. Is it revenue? Is it schedule? Is it staying on time? Is it patient experience scores? And how do you connect the dots then between the behaviors that you want that person to engage in and what it's costing them relative to their most important thing? And so if we can frame it around that, we might get some traction. I will also tell you that every once in a while, if we work for a toxic boss, sometimes the only solution is to get better at standing up for ourselves. So I have a story in my first book. Do we have time for a short story?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. I have a story in my first book about a practice manager in a healthcare environment. Her name is Juanita, not her real name. We changed it because, it's a book. And
why did you choose Juanita? No, go ahead.
I don't know. And she was a practice manager. She had at some point had 2 sites and then 3 sites and then 5 sites. And then she was managing 10 sites. And as she likes to put it, if I sucked, I guess they wouldn't keep giving them to me. But early in her career, she went from 1 site to 2 sites. And as she got up and running in the new site, she discovered that one of the physicians at the practice was very difficult. And early on in her tenure there, she was in the hallway and she handed him a file. And this was when we were dealing with a lot of paper. And he took the file folder from her and he looked at it and he immediately threw it right back and it slapped her in her face. And apparently the reason he did this is because she had used the small paper clip instead of the jumbo paper clips that he preferred. And she told me what happened next wasn't anything she planned. It wasn't anything she could control. It was a reaction in the moment based on her internal wiring. She said, what happened next was as soon as that folder hit me in the face, I took it and I threw it right back in his face twice as hard. And when he caught it, I pointed my finger at him and I said, that will never effing happen again. And I walked away. And she said, in that moment, he had never been talked to that way by somebody who had stood up for themselves in that way. And she said, our interactions after that were entirely different, were more respectful, and he never reverted back to that behavior. And so what she ended up having to do was teach everybody else in the organization how to stand up to this guy. And so sometimes it's boundary setting, sometimes it's communication and creating line of sight and asking people to make some changes because it's going to benefit them. And when none of that works, then, like I said, we decide we're worthy of more and we move on.
You know, it's the same conversation you'd have with your kids about a bully at the playground. Sometimes they just need to be stood that's never happened to them before. And it goes back to the expression, I don't know if you've heard it, which is hurt kids hurt kids.
Yes.
Right? And that's what it is. I mean, him being a jerk like that, preferring his paper clips, has less to do with the paper clips and more to do about control or belonging or OCD or whatever his issue is. And so too often we get caught up in trying to solve the problem and fix the form of it. And there's an underlying issue that says, no, it's establishing ourselves saying, in our dynamic, in our relationship, we will be respectful. You don't like the paper clips? There are different ways to do that. And she was able to do that by throwing it back to him twice as hard. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the takeaway is if she had said it to him in the way that you just said it, it would have never stuck.
Right.
Saying, hey, listen, there are more appropriate professional ways for us to have the paperclip conversation, but matching his intensity and with also inappropriate behavior, in that I'm not advocating for inappropriate behavior, but sometimes you have to stand up for yourself in the same way that people come at you. And the reality is that may be the only way you get heard.
So I need to throw more insults towards Jeff so he stops doing it to me. Got it. Okay, that's my takeaway from this.
Sunjay, after all these years, it just doesn't work. So you better
I know.
Way. You know, I've been doing a lot of reading lately about Gandhi. I just I've heard so much, and I wanted to read about leadership and Gandhi. There's so many books, and Gandhi said, "Be the change you want to see in the world." And I know it's cliche, but I think that's what you're saying. The employee really has to be the change. And then, and how do you, leaders have a responsibility to demonstrate the beliefs of the company and reinforce behaviors that reflect those values. You don't get a break, just because you earned a title, right? And so I think that that applies to any leader as well. I mean, if anything, a leader has to work harder, kind of to stay in the trenches, to remain relevant. And their behaviors at work, their communication style, you talked about how they handle wins and setbacks, all affect company culture. So we had a little talk about change, I know, but I sent you guys an article that I read in Forbes magazine, and it kind of referred to Gandhi's saying, and it was called, I think, the role leadership has in company culture. And one of the things they said is that a leader focuses on the social good for employees and clients. I'm curious if you read it, but it doesn't really matter. Do you have any feelings or thoughts about that, either one of you? Because I think that's key also, is measuring the larger impact of what the company does, but also focusing in on the employee's social good as well.
Yeah, I think it's an internal thing, right? It comes from, man in the mirror, kind of Michael Jackson. But when you mentioned that, as you're talking about Gandhi, it reminds me of a story that I read about Gandhi. I don't know if it's urban legend or true, it doesn't matter. But this mother took her child to go see Gandhi and said, "Tell him he eats too much sugar." And he looks at the lady and he says, "Come back in 2 weeks." And she's like, "Okay." So come back 2 weeks later. She says, "Tell him he eats too much sugar." So he grabs the boy, looks him in the eye and goes, "You eat too much sugar. Stop it." And then so the boy kind of runs to go play. And the mother looks at him and goes, "Well, why could you do that 2 weeks ago?" And he said, 2 weeks ago, I ate too much sugar. So the idea being that if you want to say it, if you're going to exhibit, if you're going to dictate and boss people around, that you actually have to be authentic with that particular value. So if you want to have people engage, you engage. If you want to have people be respectful, you be respectful. And I actually wanted to comment something you said earlier, Joe, is this idea, it's not the employee's job to fix a toxic boss. Again, 100% agree. I think, though, when you have employees or other bosses or peers of that person acting in a way that's high integrity, that's respectful, that's the kind of values that moves the organization forward, although it's not your job to fix them, but by maintaining that integrity and that standard, you have a significant influence that they will do one of two things. Either they kind of go, everyone else is doing it, okay, I'll be respectful. Or they go, what the heck? This isn't fun. This is stupid. I didn't sign up for this. And they leave. And you get natural attrition. And both are a significant win.
Absolutely. And Jeff, to your point about social good, the what we know about how people get engaged at work and how teams evolve in stages to become high-performing teams in the workplace, in both cases, at an individual contributor level and at a team level, we know that a sense of purpose is among the most powerful factors. When I believe that my work matters, that my work makes a difference in the lives of others, that I am valued, that is sort of the magic dust of leadership. And so one of the ways in which we act as leaders, as bosses, as managers, as supervisors, to shine a light on social good is to become better storytellers. Leaders tend to be all in on the idea of thanking people for their work, for their effort, but thank you usually doesn't go far enough. It's not specific enough. If I'm going to use a healthcare example again, because that's a big part of my world. If you have a really busy day in a clinic and you walk out to the front desk as you're closing up and you tell the person working at the front desk who's had a heck of a day, hey, thanks very much for all your effort today. Should you do that? Absolutely. That matters. But if we could be more specific and tell a better story about how something they did really mattered or was noticed or made a difference, we actually supercharge their performance. We move their engagement to a higher level. So an example might be, hey, Jeff, I noticed that today, even amid all of the craziness, that you still always got up and came out from around the desk to help our elderly patients put their coat on before they went outside. And that's amazing. And I love that nobody ever told you to do that, but that's the kind of thing that really matters here. And I just want you to know how much I appreciate it. That's a hyper specific behavior. I've told a very specific story about the way in which their work matters. And I end up having them leave the space with some of that social good that I know is going to have them come back and face whatever's going to happen tomorrow with their full effort.
Hey, Joe, I wanted to say, I really appreciate you. We're starting to draw time here. I appreciate coming on the show, but more importantly, putting up with Jeff. And even outside of the podcast, being Jeff's friend. So you did a fantastic job.
You know what?
I had to go there. It was right there.
Joe, we are running out of time, and I want to take a couple of minutes because Boss Better Leadership Academy. You alluded to it. I know it's really gaining ground, and people who are participating are loving it. Please, unabashed self-promotion. Please tell people what it is.
Sure. Well, for years I would keynote at a conference and have a lot of fun with an audience. And then we would get calls from folks who would say, can you come do some training and development work with our team? And there were really 4 big obstacles to us being able to do that well. A lot of places didn't always have the budget. A lot of places, the leaders don't have time. They're so busy that anything really involved there's no bandwidth for it. There's a sustainability question. How do we, if we work with you for 6 months, Joe, what do we do with the leaders that we onboard 8 months later? And then there was an expertise piece because we don't necessarily have somebody internally who can drive the work after you're gone as well. So we looked at, once the pandemic hit and everybody all at once had to get better at this, we looked at, is there a way that we can create an ongoing leadership development program for organizations that overcomes all 4 of those obstacles? So that was the genesis of our Leadership Academy. Our Leadership Academy is a subscription that companies pay, where every month we push out a piece of leadership development content to all the managers in that company. In some months, it's a micro learning course that they consume on demand in 20 minutes or less. In some months, it's a live 1-hour coaching clinic themed around a particular topic or skill where people get access to me. We do dialogue, we do Q&A, we do mini training. And then 2 to 3 times a year, we hold what we call our Boss Better virtual summits, which have sort of 3-hour half-day deeper dive workshops. And then as part of our academy, we have a digital vault where all of that goes so that if people can't attend live, they can view it on demand. You can go back and get it after the fact. The people who have worked with me for years know that I will scream from the rooftops that one and done training doesn't work. If people, and everybody here, Sunjay, I know that you know this, Jeff, I know that you know this. If people call you up and ask you to come in and do a single workshop and nothing else, it's like stealing. Because I know I'm going to come in, I'm going to do a good job, and you're going to have a great 10 days. Or maybe if you're Jeff and mediocre, they'll have a great 2 days. Zing! Sorry, I had to. You told me to be irreverent. I don't.
Right?
I will give you your $5 later. Thanks, Joe.
Okay, no problem. But one and done training doesn't work because once you spark momentum, if there's nothing in place to help drive it long term and to reinforce the behavior change and the skill development that you were doing, it's a waste of money. It's a waste of time. And so that's why, not to get too long-winded about it, that's why we built our Leadership Academy the way that we did. You can learn more about it at joemull.com.
Joe,
thank you for that, Jeff. I appreciate the chance to talk about that.
Thank you so much for being here. I'm, we always say that we're sorry that the time is up. I truly am sorry. Like with Stephen Rayfield, when he was on, we were just kidding. But with you, it's true. I wish that we could do so much more. He's going to kill me, but he's also a friend. And by the way, Sunjay, I called Joe a friend. He's never called me the friend. So just saying.
Oh, and you know what? My respect just went up for him. So this is
Joe, I'm going to go with acquaintance. Just kidding, buddy.
Thank you, everyone. Listen, August 25th, we have no idea what the topic will be. I know that I won't be here, but hopefully the other three guys will be here. And we always love you and welcome you. And we're so happy that you join us every other Wednesday and join us on August the 25th at the same time, same place. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Cheers.
Thanks for having me.